Okay, hello everybody and welcome back. So this section we talk about urbanization, cities, and what are they exactly? Okay, we'll get there. First, we have to go all the way back. So we're going to do the fast forward version of this. So human beings living in these hunter-gatherer societies. They don't put down permanent settlements. They don't build cities. They don't stay in one place for long periods of time, right? They have to move seasonally. They have to move with migration patterns of animals, all right, all sorts of other factors make these people nomadic until development of this thing called agriculture, right? Now, people don't have to move around constantly to be able to find enough food to survive. They can stay in one area, farm the land, provide enough food for themselves, their families, everybody can eat, and they can start to build up and concentrate, right? First cities in the world start to emerge after agriculture is developed. Now, what are the factors here that you need to get cities? Well, broadly speaking, there's three of them, and they have not changed, ever. First one is climate, right? It needs to be something that's comfortable for human beings. This is in East Africa, right? This is a climate that is mostly warm, good bit of rain, not extreme in one direction or another, tends to be pretty consistent. You need a comfortable, generally warm climate, but not always. You need food, right? You need surplus food. Enough food to where people don't have to leave the city and go elsewhere to be able to eat. Third thing is you need connections between people, some sort of social cohesion, all right? You can't have a city where half of it is at war with the other half. That will not survive. Those three factors are what you need, and cities begin to develop as a result. Where and when? Roughly 5 to 10,000 years ago, largely in this area called the Fertile Crescent, and this is really oversimplifying everything, the quick version right up into Anatolia. What is the modern day Middle East? Much of this region is more arid now than it used to be, but we're just going to go with that for now. Awesome. Industrialization is one of the big factors that starts to really change this and to concentrate people into cities where there are factories. That's where the jobs are. Prior to industrialization, most of the work that got done was done in the home or near the home. This is what starts to draw people into cities, concentrate them together. They can produce goods, they can make more money than they could in rural areas. And that is still mostly true. So these areas of the world, right, especially in Northern Europe, that begin to industrialize first, maybe starting in 1750 up through 1850 for the beginnings of industrialization. These are the places that first start to see urbanization and the concentration of human beings into these areas where they can produce lots of goods and send them elsewhere and bring in a lot of money as a result, right? This has only gotten more concentrated over time, right? People in 1956, far more concentrated into cities even than in 1850. This period of time from maybe 1870 to about 1970, that 100 years is so completely transformational in so many ways for every area of people's lives, right? This included, notice, concentration of human beings, especially in Europe, in the global West and South America. Now, we can fast forward to 2023, right, and look at where people are today. So we notice that this trend has only gotten stronger over time, right? People being more and more concentrated into cities. This applies to the entire world for a number of reasons, which we'll get to. The other thing that I want to mention here, when we talked about human population and where most people are, we said that most of them are in East, South, and Southeast Asia, right, in this circle, and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, you notice how this is like exactly the opposite of that other trend, right? So areas where most of the people live in the world are not areas which are increasingly urbanized, but they are all moving in that direction. Urbanization is a universal trend and one of the biggest global bulldozers that is driving irreversible change in the way that humans live, in the way that they network, and in the way that they make money. All right. We can look at this, the kind of crossover point, right? So this is the urban population in red, stretching back to 1960 post-war. The rural population in green, which if we notice, right, everything before this on the graph, before 1960, was like all rural, all right? There were more people who lived in rural areas than urban areas since the beginning of time, all the way up until, looks like about 2005, right? It was the first time in the history of humanity when this changed, right? And we can only expect this trend to accelerate. Urban population increasing, rural population staying the same or even decreasing. The reasons why. So there's many of them. The biggest one is money, as we'll see. People want to live in cities, right? They want to live in cities of all size because that's where the jobs are. That's where the money is to be made. Summed up in this forever phrase from the 90s, it's the economy, all right? These areas, right, megacities all the way on down to urban settlements, this is where the jobs are. This is where the money is to be made. This is where the production is. It even applies to us in the United States and the formation of our country, right? So British Royal Crown is imposing taxes and preventing these people who are wealthy property owners from being able to do business the way that they see fit. And broadly speaking, these folks, right, wealthy property owners, are divided into two groups. You have your northern merchant class, tends to live in cities, tends to focus on producing goods. Then you have your southern rural agriculturalists, right? To sum them up into single people, as is often convenient, right? Thomas Jefferson as the representation of the South, the southern yeoman farmer who lives on a plot of land and farms it totally rugged independently, right? And in the North, this merchant class as summed up by Alexander Hamilton, right? Now, there's a problem here. There is a sort of tension between these groups because they both need each other despite having very different interests, right? So these northern cities where you have concentrated population cannot possibly farm enough food on their own to feed how many people are there. They have to import it from rural agricultural areas. On the other hand, these people who are the rugged, independent farmers, they cannot produce goods on the homestead. Goods are being manufactured on a mass industrial scale here, right, in the north, in the cities. So these two, despite having very different interests and way of life, are forced to trade with each other, and to unify as a result was in their mutual best interest, as different as they were. Awesome. Back to the present day, right? So we have the degree of urbanization here, right? The percentage of the population that lives in concentrated urban areas or cities. And this is GDP per capita, right? Which is a measure of about how much money each person makes, about how much stuff you would expect them to have, right? And it's per capita, so it's not the whole country put together, it is per person. And as messy as this is, right, as messy of a data set as it is, the trend could not possibly be more clear, right? Areas where people are increasingly urbanized have more jobs, have more money. We've talked some about this kind of mental image we have, right? The poorest people in the entire world, where they are, how they live. Sometimes intuitively we might think about them as living in the cities or working manufacturing jobs, right? Sweatshops. In some countries that's true, but broadly speaking, it isn't. The poorest people in the entire world are rural farmers, right? Who live in rural areas, they farm small plots of land, they make maybe enough food to feed themselves, might have a little bit extra, and in turn, some of the very most successful programs from the UN to help people improve their lives go to those rural areas, teach people techniques that allow them to make more food on their own land, and then they have enough to go and sell extra corn on the market. They use that money to send their kids to school, and we can do the rest from there, right? A lot of those industrial jobs, sweatshop jobs, as tedious and exhausting and physically brutal as they can be, people who work those jobs are making, as a rough estimate, like 10 times as much as they would as farmers. People move hundreds of miles to the city to get those jobs, send money back to rural areas, and then they can start to afford the things that they really want. Like what? Shoes, watches, better houses, sending the kids to school, maybe a beverage of their choice, right? Be able to afford things like weddings that bring pride, right? And a sense of dignity and status. Awesome. Biggest cities in the world, right? Most of these are concentrated where all the people are. Big shocker there, right? You will notice, looking through this list, right, There's only 2 cities in North and South America that even make the list, right? So New York City is up there, and this is not just like the New York City official proper, but like the whole metropolitan area, right, around New York. Mexico City, slightly larger. Notice, all the others are not in North or South America. There's only 1 U.S. city even on this list, right? Tokyo, right? Delhi in India, Shanghai in China. Population is concentrated here, once again, into East Asia, South Asia, some in Sub-Saharan Africa, some in South America. Just to check, right? Do we know how many people are in the greater Phoenix area, right, of this thing, aka Maricopa County? So it's going to be something like 5 million, right? So 5 million in Maricopa County compared to 40 million in Tokyo. So as many people as there are here, it's nothing compared to what it's like where most of the people live in the rest of the world. Now, to be clear, a lot of the folks who are moving to these, megalopolis cities, big, giant cities, they don't move there into, high-rise apartments with a person at the front desk who takes them up the, elevator lined with marble, right? They live in these communities called slums, and that's not a derogatory term. That is the official term for these things. They are called slums. These are informal settlements. They are off the political map. Cities themselves will often say, oh no, there's no people living there. We don't know what you mean. Nope. Because they don't want to provide services, right? It costs the city money to be able to extend services of water, sewer, trash, electricity to these communities. They tend to have little, if any, political organization, tend to have little, if any, services. They're often left to get their own water, electricity, and manage their waste in ways that are creative at best and really, really challenging and harmful, more like it. But this is a lot of the trend, and given the option, people would rather live here where there's more opportunities than in rural areas where there is no one. Given a choice, you would still rather live in a city even if conditions are extremely rough. And that is true across the entire world, no matter how you cut it. The growth of slums especially is expected to sharply increase over time as people move to the outskirts of these big, giant cities and try to make a living, try to make it work, try to produce more than they ever could on their farm. And we should only expect urbanization to continue. We should only expect slums to continue growing exponentially as a result. And we're going to leave it at that and talk about population over deep time, going prehistoric.